Well, Ben, welcome back, man. It's always great to visit with you.
Yeah, likewise. Welcome back, thanks for having me back, and welcome back to the States. Right since we last talked.
Yeah. So we usually visit at least once a month, and I feel like we missed. I think we probably spoke in July before I went to Africa, and then we didn't touch base in August. You've been quite busy, busy
Yeah,
time of the year for you. Just got back from the SCI board meeting, and we'll talk about some of that stuff as well. But certainly great to catch up. Um,
absolutely.
um, well, let's start with this, Ben. Let's just get right into it. It seems like there's always some kind of international import ban that hunters are facing. Call it trophy hunting, whatever. Trophy hunting is conservation. Hunting is conservation. But I gotta say, kudos to Campfire for recently petitioning. I suppose is it President Biden here, his executive order on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities. Okay, so we see that domestically all the time, right? Sure. I mean, that's why you did it. So why don't we see that internationally? Like, hey, or do we care about what third world countries need? And if we do, then we have to understand and accept the reality that hunting puts a monetary value into those communities. I mean, I just got back from Africa, and one of the trackers was like, Cable, it's so great to see you again. And it's even better, I got to see you twice this year because last year was canceled. But I just have to tell you that I didn't have a job for a year because of COVID. So hunting obviously puts food on his table, both financially and these people reap the benefits of the animals that hunters shoot. And I've seen it. I mean, they fight over the stomach lining, the internal organ, the intestines, Ben.
Yep.
They fight over that stuff. It's a delicacy. Not to mention, I mean, just all the other venison, thousands and thousands of pounds every week that each safari company is just pumping right back into the local community. So, obviously a monetary value. It makes the people that otherwise, the indigenous people in Africa, by and large, they just see an animal. They see meat. So we are trying to change that perspective and say, hey, there's a value in this. Let's conserve it. Let's have it stick around.
Yep.
And they do see that because of hunters' dollars feeding their families. But it's just so idiotic when Americans sit over here and think they know what's best for third world countries. Like, let's enact racial equality here in the States, but then let's speak out of the other side of our mouth and say, hey, third world countries, let's condemn hunting. Let's shut down your commerce, your way to make a living, because hunting's bad.
Right. And I mean, kudos to Campfire for calling it out, right? Or at least challenging it. If there's an executive order from the president, so that carries with it the power of law. It's the president telling the whole of government that they need to make their decisions, looking through that lens of racial equity across the whole of government, then apply it to permitting for Fish and Wildlife Service. Actually listen to the folks on the ground that are doing the right things to manage their wildlife, their natural resources to better their communities. And they have it in their best interest to have that resource stick around for as long as humanly possible. So why don't we recognize that when determining permit processing? And yeah, again, kudos to Campfire for recognizing that, calling it out. Now the challenge is to make sure that we're not just making this administration look like hypocrites, but getting them to do what's right and following the executive order.
Right. Well, it seems like a lot of times one side just picks and chooses when they want things to apply to their narrative, and if it doesn't fit the narrative, then did it really happen?
Doesn't
No,
fit in this box, right?
Oh no, it's 2 + 2 = 5.
Right.
But anyway, okay, so cool stuff on that front. What about access expansion? I also read in your newsletter, we just gained like 2.1 million acres of hunting public land access.
Yeah, 2.1 million acres of access for hunting and fishing on wildlife refuges. Final rule was announced by Fish and Wildlife on Tuesday, so just yesterday. When Trump was in office, Secretary Zinke at the time signed an executive or a secretarial order that directed Fish and Wildlife to prioritize access. And so how the service acted on that was they started identifying places where there weren't current opportunities or there were unavailable opportunities and opening them up. So in the last administration or the previous 2 years, over 5 million acres were opened up. And with that order still in place, the service, continued to follow it and opened up 2.1 new acres of opportunity. Our blog covers a number of the highlights, but really goes across, the most of the lower 48. Awesome elk opportunities out in Idaho, but then a lot of smaller opportunities that just didn't exist before, like an expansion on turkey seasons or adding some small game. So,
so I have to ask the question, and I always want to be fair. If Biden deserves credit, then we'll give him credit. If he doesn't, then we won't. But is this his doing, or is this just something that was going to happen regardless of whether Trump or Biden won the election?
It happened under his watch. They had an open comment period. I know that the folks against it that are suing the last administration still have a standing lawsuit to shut down this hunt fish rule, is what we call it. They put their comments in, but we spoke up as well. Safari Club members in droves sent public comments in support. At the end of the day, it stood up. I think, just going back, it's directive that and priority that was put in place under the last administration that still stands. If that was already underway and everyone already had their marching orders, the whole mass of folks that work at Fish and Wildlife, they weren't just going to reverse course on it until told not to do so. So I don't know if it slipped through or was prioritized, but we're going to celebrate it.
Yeah. Well, I'll give credit where credit's due. At least it didn't get kiboshed under his watch. So, he's got enough problems going on. We'll give him a little credit for that.
Get started.
Raul Grijalva. He's a congressman from Arizona, and he has drawn my ire many times over the years. There's so many different things that animal rights activist type of legislation, anti-hunting legislation that this guy has drummed up. Every time I see his name, I just cringe. But I read that he actually on maybe it was called Endangered Species Day, something like that. He drafted a bill that would focus on hey, let's not talk about wolves for once, and let's focus on this endangered tortoise over here that no one gives a crap about.
Right.
I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, like the non-iconics, and not just always trying to find a way to politicize the ESA. I mean, we talk about a small segment of it, that drive campaign dollars to the other side rather than the full picture of, the non-iconics that it actually focuses on. But under Raul Grijalva, he's actually the representative for our offices out in Tucson. And if he's listening today, he's still invited to come visit our museum anytime.
So is there something that I wasn't interpreting right, about this piece of legislation, or was it? I mean, it seemed like it seemed pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
it was a bad thing. Okay.
No. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just an example of where maybe his attention and his cohort's attention should be, rather than politicizing.
Instead of focusing on wolves and grizzlies and all of those ones that give the antis the warm fuzzy feelings when they see one. And of course, when those animals get sick, Ben, everyone comes to hospice. They all sit around the little bed there, and the animal gets old and just dies of natural causes, surrounded by its family.
Right. It's no better. Nice.
What about Mopane? I think we avoided possibly another Cecil situation here.
Yeah.
And I think I was actually in Africa when this happened, so I wasn't
interesting
100% up to snuff on it. But anyway, talk about the story itself, and then how it's kind of like we learned from the previous situation with Cecil how to respond when something like this happens.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess starting point is, I mean, if you want to have a named lion really grab the attention, maybe give it a more cute British name like Nigel or Cecil, not name it after a tree. But last month, the story broke, where it always does over in the UK, where they like to demonize hunters, with misleading stories. Talking about an American hunter that went over and killed, the pride of the pride, Mopane. We started hearing a lot about it, obviously, but wanted to do some fact checking. Who was the hunter? Was it done legally? So we work our back channels. And
where did this hunt take place?
Mopane is South Africa, right?
Okay. I don't think that. I think the only lion hunting in South Africa is
It's bred. Yeah. Gosh, you asked me right now. It's just slipping my head.
I'm gonna guess Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Or Zambia.
So yeah, and I know it's Zim. Yeah, because we were in touch with Zim Parks. Duh. Okay, sorry. So yeah.
Zimbabwe.
Yep, Zimbabwe.
Okay.
So it takes place in Zimbabwe. So we see the story break. We want to make sure off the bat before we make any sort of statement that it was done legally. So we reach out to Zim Parks from Zimbabwe, and they get back to us, showing us documentation and everything, and I ask them, are they going to put out a statement? They say, absolutely, and in their statement that they put out publicly, I mean, a whole paragraph about how the lion wasn't collared, there's no way to identify if its name was Mopane. And as a matter of fact, we don't name our lions Jim or Mopane or Nigel or Cecil, So they made that point really clear, which was awesome. So have the facts behind it, it was totally legally done. And then out of nowhere, a freelance writer for Barstool Sports of all platforms, which is 11 million people on Instagram, writes this really poorly thoughtless kind of story about Mopane and how hunters are evil and hunters should be hunted, not Mopane.
Right, because Mopane was set up to die in his hospice bed with all of his friends around him.
Exactly. So we'll call him Dante, right? That's his name. Uh-huh. And so we reach out to the editor for Barstool Outdoors, right? Sydney Wells over there.
Yeah, that seems weird that they're going to post this smut piece on demonizing hunting while they've got a Barstool Outdoors outlet.
Yeah, I mean, they love their clicks, and like these things can get clicks. So they let Dante do his thing, but we're going to hold him accountable. And he was calling the hunter a poacher and all that. It's like just not using the right language. So we got in touch with Sydney, who was fired up to begin with. She goes, I'm gonna give a response. I'm gonna do it right, So we directed her to our website where we have a whole page on international hunting and all the facts there, and she was able to get a trove of information and wrote up a response piece, followed up with a Twitter dialogue with Dante, where, he ended up tweeting, my hands are up, you've made great points and opened my eyes. I still don't agree with hunting, but this makes a lot of sense, basically apologized and threw up the flag. So her story came out, she thanked us for the work we're doing. Over here at SCI, we track where stories are getting a lot of traction and if it's negative or positive, and thing was peaking out, really high at the time, and it came crashing down because you get the facts and then you correct the record on it. Puts you in a good situation, much better situation than we saw with Cecil, playing out.
I think Cecil single-handedly impacted international trophy hunting more so than probably anything else in my lifetime.
Yeah.
One specific animal in a negative way.
Yep.
So like really, we can't afford to have more of those instances. So learning from that situation, how do we get ahead of it, get in front of it, to have the actual wildlife agency, the Zim Parks, come out and say, hey, this is a legal hunt. That's huge. So good on us, good on SCI for getting in front of that thing before it snowballed. What about other things that you guys discussed at the recent board meeting? I know you just got back from that.
Yeah, I mean, we're just looking back at highlights, since our last board meeting in the spring. So just a lot of the work that's gone on over the summertime, right? I mean, we've just seen 3 trophy ban attempts, across the world that have been either defeated or neutered. If you go to Brussels, language was amended there to cut out trophy bans. That was a huge win. In Sacramento, the Iconic Species Act was introduced again by Stern, which used to include in it language to ban trophies. They took that language out because it wasn't palpable, even in the places, bad as Sacramento. And then in Hartford, they ended up amending a similar trophy ban so aggressively that it didn't change anything, Uh-huh. It was a law that passed that didn't change anything. Fish and Wildlife still had deference on everything. So huge win there. We've talked about it before, but just looking at, keeping open those 40 million acres of access for hunting caribou and moose in Alaska. I mean, that was Sportsman's voice. We were able to lead on that, staking out a position as, insisting on a no net loss policy for access for hunting on public lands. 40 million, if that had gone shut down, it would have really brought 2.1 million acres of new access down to size, right?
Mm-hmm.
That would be a huge loss when you do the math there.
Well, it would have just set a horrible precedent.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, here's the local people that live in this area decided, we really want this just to be ours. And
right.
Even though you own it, the American public, you no longer get to utilize it. If people could just do that, then what's next? Where I'm going hunting in New Mexico, hey, we live on this mountain. We don't think you should come hunt here.
Yep.
They did in Alaska, so we're going to try to do it here.
A lot of the fees to hunt in Alaska are, subsidized by non-resident tags. That's the price that's paid. It's subsidized, with their conservation efforts there. But talking about, setting precedent, like we broke precedent where, the Alaskan Subsistence Board had never had an open comment period for these sorts of decisions. And we just flooded them, with the petition and strong testimony where they decided to have it, be open.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up changing their minds. So, that Sportsman's United voice made a huge difference there.
Right.
And then I just want to touch too, on Chipman, David Chipman, ATF nominee. Unprecedented.
You can call him by his real name.
Bad Egg?
No. David Waco Chipman.
Waco Waco.
Yeah.
Unprecedented though to have sportsmen step in and oppose, just taking it down to he would hurt Pittman Robertson funds, he would hurt conservation funds. So you ended up seeing groups from Ducks Unlimited to the NRA, with us in it, opposing. And we had thousands upon thousands of notes sent to senators, from SCI. And
did you see if BHA said anything about it?
They did not. They were on. They weren't on the big group letter, right? Well, yeah. To this day, he hasn't garnered the support to be to go through and be confirmed. We saw a couple weeks ago. You may have still been in Africa, but all the gun grabbing groups, they went to the White House with a number one priority for the White House to set up a gun violence office within the White House. And just having been around the block, in DC for a bit, if you're an interest group, you have one priority that you ask the White House for. You don't go with two, and their priority up until a couple weeks ago was for David Chipman to be the ATF director. And now with them signaling that they have a new priority, kind of tells you what his fate is. I don't know when we see it withdrawn, his nomination, not until they have someone else to backfill it. But he doesn't have the support, so he's hanging out in purgatory right now. And that's, I think, greatly due. Obviously, NRA, NSSF, huge credit there.
So you think that nomination's dead?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that is great news.
Yeah.
I always just figured that they would somehow get it done regardless of how much hell we raised. So that's great to see that we can still raise hell and accomplish things.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's
I think we can do it. And
being as close as it is, and you're able to, meet with and talk with, some of these key decision makers makes a big difference. Angus King not coming out in support, from Maine. That's all it takes.
Yeah. And what has Manchin said anything publicly on Chipman?
He didn't have to.
Yeah.
Tired of being the guy that has to, say everything.
Let somebody else take the fall. Every time he does something that is even could be considered pro Second Amendment, the Democrats just vilify him. His own party throws him to the wolves.
Yep.
But for him to take a stand against the Second Amendment would be political suicide because West Virginians don't want to put up with that.
Right.
They like their guns.
No tolerance there. Right.
So he's in. I've often said on the show, I think he's the most powerful man in America right now.
Right. I was going to say he's in a tough spot with a lot of, targets on him, but that's because he's in a good spot, right? He is very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, good stuff on the Chipman front then, because that would have been, you and I talked about, all of those Pittman Robertson dollars. And the thing that a lot of people, you and I know it, and probably most people listening to the show, but if you're listening, tell your friends, like, Pittman Robertson is supported by non-hunters too. If your buddy shoots at the gun range, he's supporting hunting and conservation, whether he realizes it or not. And when someone like Chipman, if he would have, if that nomination would have gone through or goes through, I mean, that's a loss for every, not just hunter, but gun enthusiast, every shooter, competitive shooter. It would be devastating.
Yep. AR-15, most popular gun in America. All those dollars taxed up, they go right to PR, whether or not you're using it to get out and plank or hunt.
Well, it's going to get a lot more expensive to do that now that Biden banned Russian ammunition. So
yeah,
I know. I bought some of that Wolf. I don't use it to hunt with. I haven't even shot it, but I bought 1,000 rounds because I was like, oh yeah, I'd like to have 1,000 rounds of cheap AR ammo, and just in case, just in case I can't find it or
be
hits
prepared,
the fan or whatever.
Have a backup.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, thanks for that, Biden. So anyway, great stuff, Ben. I'm really excited about number one. I mean, that Mopane thing, that could have just been terrible for us. So again, great job on that. And we'll keep fighting these import bans. And maybe someday I'll get my Bonnebuck back from South Africa, which is still sitting over there for some stupid reason.
Can I touch on one thing?
Yeah.
So yesterday, Fish and Wildlife moved to settle with the DC court to allow Namibian elephant permits that have been held up with no good reason to be processed. We're going to keep fighting to make sure that they're granted. But that settlement is a blueprint for species like the Bonnebuck, which I still cannot answer why the Bonnebuck is held up the way it is, right?
Yeah.
But with this Fish and Wildlife Service settling that way on elephants, I mean, that's the next ask. It's other. Okay, well, these are all Namibian, so other countries with elephants, but it's also, what's the deal with the Bonnebuck?
I mean, it's not even like a megafauna species. It's like the blessbuck's prettier cousin. Like, that's what it's beautiful, right? But it's.
If I had one, I'd be really upset that I don't have it.
Dude, it's such a gorgeous animal.
So cool.
But I mean, it's just a plains game species that historically was almost hunted to extinction for meat hunting due to their close proximity to Cape Town and how many people live there. Ranchers made a vested interest in bringing this species back, and it's totally recovered. I mean, you can see them everywhere now. Yep. So the fact that, like, historically, okay, it was in trouble, but here we are in 2021 and you still can't bring the damn thing home. For what reason?
It's nuts. I don't think one's gotten in since 2017.
Yeah. Well, that's when I shot it. So, well, someday, fingers crossed.
Stay tuned for more on that front. I can't say anything else, but we're tuned in.
Carl, my PH, told me, he's like, I think I'm just going to mount it and hang it in the lodge. I was like, I'll be damned if you are. Waited this long. Oh, all right, Ben. Well, hey, always appreciate it, man. I encourage folks to check out SCI's website, safariclub.org, and the new page, one that I like, the international hunting page. That's a new addition. Yeah. So folks can check that out. There's lots of great content, resources, links to articles on that page as well. And yeah, great stuff, man. I look forward to our next visit.
Cable, as always, man, really appreciate it. Great to see you again.
You too, brother. Take care.
You too.